sorry.
They had to go in, but now they're both on their way back. But they're out on the other side of Ann Arbor. They're not coming back.
Yeah, because he's probably at, well, did they finally take him to U of M?
I mean, it's
I
kind
don't
of
know. I talked to him about 10
double-edged sword on
seconds
their end because
on the phone.
you know what I mean.
Yeah.
It's like
So, but they're both on their way back.
Well, that's
can we get a
different.
strip of grass between them?
News they didn't keep them.
He is
And then the two neighbors are like, it's your turn to mow it, it's full of weeds. It's mine.
much trouble with it.
Mow it.
You mow bladder infection.
You mow it, but I'll buy my
I
snow.
just hope they don't put a.
By the way, who does mow?
That's gonna kill, that'll just.
I could.
Yeah, so that was about 4:30 was when I
I
found
was
out.
gonna say, because he didn't mention to me that he wasn't gonna be here.
So there's a pretty exhaustive wetland study too. Huh?
They did.
That mirror. It's got the same tone on the. How close are you? Okay. We'll see you in a few minutes. In a second. You're stuck sitting next to me tonight.
Just, it looks like, I mean, because most of that land, if you look at the existing conditions, it's pretty
He's
flat.
excused.
They almost have the same elevation, so the wetland.
And Kelly and
but it looks like they
Medina
placed
are as well.
grade for the entire.
So it's just the four of us.
You could look along the perimeter. So my only question is, how does
Right.
that grade?
Drive careful.
What's the,
See you in a minute.
What are the slopes? And is it, is it going to add more water to the wetland, and how does that affect it?
He's at Belleville and Tyler.
Making that awful left turn.
Yeah, they're trying to get through that light.
Oh, gosh.
What drives me crazy there is everybody that comes
Which I think
down
is good.
Belleville
There is
Road
that
that
drain,
then
whatever
slows
it's
down
called.
and stops and then pulls into the middle to turn into the car wash. And they sit because of that. The way that turn is, you
Yep.
can't quite see it.
These are retention or
I can't
detention?
turn enough. I
Do they-
can't turn
Mm-hmm.
into that one, but.
Right.
Yes.
No idea what you're talking about. No idea what you're talking about. I always go around the block.
Yeah.
Good evening, everybody. We're just waiting for one more commissioner. We'll start momentarily, okay?
Obligated, like I need to hammer, like use the hammer at some point just to.
Are you gearing up for the break? Thanksgiving break? Milk.
There's no breaks anymore. There's no nothing.
No, but slow down as you come to work. And I will take ordinance amendments and all that.
Right.
And that.
Yes. As far as presentation goes, just clicker.
Yeah.
I don't have a clicker, so I'll ask you.
Yeah, we're supposed to be slowing down. It's the holidays,
This up here, if you guys can just come on up.
We can do 4 weeks. I'm like, yeah,
Oh,
for
okay.
each
Perfect.
client,
Thank you.
right? I have 6. 6 of
Right.
They all cheer.
Stuck by a train.
Oh man.
Hello. I'm Bernie. Hi, Lydia.
We had an updated agenda.
Agenda.
Yep.
Yeah. Hi.
coming from Ann Arbor and I was fine, and then all of a sudden it's like, by the way, now you're stopped.
Yeah.
Where did, it's like 4 o'clock, where's everybody? No, you're okay. You ready? Good evening and welcome to the Charter Township of Van Buren Planning Commission meeting for Wednesday, November 9th, 2022. Have a roll call, please.
Brian Cullen.
Here.
Nina Atchison is excused. Callie Barr is excused. Bernie Grant.
Here.
Sherry Budd.
Here.
Jeff Jar is also excused. And Brian Kelly.
Here. We have a agenda before us. We have an agenda before us. Do I have a motion to approve tonight's agenda?
Make a motion to approve the agenda as presented.
Support.
And motion by Commissioner Budd, support by Commissioner Cullen. Is there any discussions regarding the motion? All right, all in favor to approve tonight's agenda, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? And the agenda is approved. Our next item up is approval of the minutes from the regular meeting of October 26, 2022. I have a motion to approve the minutes.
I move to approve the minutes of October 26th, 2022.
Do we have support?
I'd support.
So I have motion by Commissioner Cullen, support by Commissioner Grant. Have any discussion regarding the minutes? All in favor to approve the minutes from the regular meeting of October 26, 2022, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? And the meeting minutes are approved. We're at item 1 on our agenda this evening, which is a public hearing. We have a request by Chris Gardner on behalf of the owner SB Investments regarding a development titled Brookwood. We have a public hearing that has been noticed.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. If I could, I'd like to go up and make a few comments about this part of the agenda before we invite public comment. So,
Thank you so much, Director Barr. Would you like me to open the?
Yes.
All right. Thank you so much. We have a motion to approve the public hearing.
I make a motion, we open the public hearing.
Support.
So I have a motion to open the public hearing by Commissioner Budd. We have support by Commissioner Cullen. Any discussion regarding the motion? All in favor to open the public hearing, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Seeing there's none, the public hearing is now open. Right, thank you so much, Director Power.
you're welcome. Thank you, Planning Commission. Thank you, everybody who's able to attend the meeting this evening. This portion of an agenda is typically reserved for members of the public to make comment, to ask questions, so that they can be part of the later deliberation on a project. The main project being considered tonight is the Brookwood Senior Housing Project proposed on the parcel on Tyler Road. It's a fairly large project with some depth to it, and it may be the first time some of you have seen it. So what I'd like to do is just to go over what the process is like tonight and talk about the format of tonight's meeting with respect to what we're going to hear from our staff and reviewing consultants, what we're going to hear from the applicant, and kind of what the next steps might be. But knowing that this is the first step in the process of a big project, I'd like to just kind of introduce some of the basics of the project. And then the other part of this hearing section will be the public comment. Later in our agenda tonight, we have a couple of old business items that are related to a different project called Cobblestone Creek Villas. And that's a minor revision to a project that this commission has already began reviewing a few months ago. So we are going to get back into that project. And then in the new business portion of tonight's meeting, we will get a little bit more in depth with the Brookwood project that we're here for the public hearing for. In that new business section where we talk about Brookwood again, we'll go over what the special land use aspect of the project is, and we'll go over what the preliminary site plan aspect of the project is. I'll defer to the Planning Commission on how much they want to go through those items, but I also want to give the applicant a chance to make their presentation on the project. And then in a simple and conventional project, you usually hear full reports from our reviewing staff. Tonight, I think we're going to kind of summarize some of the things from those reports, but you'll probably hear more from those at a later meeting date, because I think given the scale of the project, the Planning Commission not having full attendance tonight, the Planning Commission's probably going to have some questions and want to have more membership here to make the decision on the project before we actually move forward. So we'll save a lot of the staff review comments for a later time if that's the case. But right now, as we get into the public hearing, again, I just wanted to give a brief overview of what the project is. You're looking at at the top left portion of this screen, you're looking at a site map that shows the roughly 44-acre parcel that's to the west of Hickory Woods, on the north side of Tyler Road, east of Morton Taylor Road. The north arrow is the yellow triangle on that image, so you have to kind of reorient the way you're looking at it to see the site as it's presented in the plans. You have to kind of flip that sideways. So in that image to the right, you're looking at Tyler Road on the right side of the screen, northbound on the left side of the screen, and there's also a architectural elevation showing the architecture of the typical fourplex building that's proposed with this project. Some basics again, and this is my last slide before I open it up to comments and questions. This is a 44-acre parcel west of Hickory Woods, as mentioned. The zoning of the parcel is RM, which is multiple family residential district. There will be about 25.9 acres disturbed in the proposed construction. And I'll just mention that there is significant wetlands on the site that are part of the open space mix on the site that the applicant has accounted for and has been discussing with the state of Michigan. The project includes 132 units and a clubhouse, and those units are attached condominium-style units in 2, 4, and 6-plex buildings. There's about 154,000, a little more than 154,000 square feet of building area. As far as traffic management and the road network for this site, I'm sure you'll hear from the applicant that different ways of getting into and out of the project were reviewed, given the significant wetlands on the north and west, kind of surrounding those portions of the site where there could be maybe a second road connection. There's significant wetland coverage. So that's a long way of saying that this project has all of its access in a boulevard-style entry off of Tyler Road, and that involved reducing the number of units in the project to accommodate that kind of access. Along with that kind of access layout, there was a traffic study performed by Wade Trim that shows some of the data about the new trip generation from this use and how many people are going to be driving into and out of the site on a daily basis, with, at this time, no recommendations for specific improvements at intersections in the area. The project has 284 parking spaces, of which only 20 are spaces designated for the units adjacent to the streets. There's also 264 garage spaces, with each of the 132 units having a 2-car garage. I mentioned the traffic study, and just to reiterate the wetlands, that's something that does drive some of the design on this site, where you typically have kind of maybe a grid pattern for a development like this, where you have more than one connection of water main, sanitary sewer, roads. Because of the wetlands in this case, and because of some of the other issues that I'm sure the applicant will speak to, those connections are not being proposed. There's connectivity to Tyler Road and a couple of different points, but nothing to the north, east, or west at this time. And I believe there's a conservation easement that's being considered for the wetlands in the north end of the site. So that's kind of the basics. I guess I wanted to give that as just a rough overview so that, if you look at this image, you have an idea of where the project is. Maybe you've seen the plans online on our packet, but anybody from the audience who has any comments, feel free to come on up and speak to it. And we'll hear from the applicants a little later tonight. Okay.
Thank you so much, Director Power. So at this time, if anybody would like to step up to the microphone that's here to speak on this agenda item, feel free to come on up. Just state your name and your address for everybody and speak into the microphone, please.
My name is Eric Moore, and I live at 42881 Bradley. So real close to where that arrow is, we are my property and then my neighbor Ray. our property backs up to that bowling alley. So I'm on the very east side. So the back of my property does not see into that condo complex. It's all woods. So, yeah, so I'm here just to kind of hear what's going on. You know, we got the letter and it's like, oh my gosh, are they going to bring this project all the way back up to our boundary line? And I'm glad to see that you're putting a buffer zone in, some type of, so I just wanted to hear more of the details of what that looks like, what kind of distance is there, because, you know, we ended up paying premium prices for lots that back up and have wood. So I bought my home 2 years ago, and in the appraisal, you know, they tacked on a significant number because it backs up to woods. And so that has great value for my wife and I. So this is, I wanted you to know kind of, I'm excited about the project, and I think, you know, this kind of thing is good for our community, and especially all of our aging population like me. But just wanted to get a better understanding of what's happening on that north end. So as the evening unfolds, look forward to hearing some more detail on that.
Great, thank you so much for coming this evening.
My name is Carolyn Rushing. I reside at 8844 Ironwood, which is in part of the Hickory Woods community. And my unit backs up to the stand of trees that's on the east side of the property. And when I bought in there, we were told that nothing would be built behind us because of the wetlands. And I can appreciate that you're going to take into account all of that. But my question would be, is the stand of trees that runs that entire whole distance that would separate the new unit from Hickory Woods, will those trees remain? Because that gives us our privacy, it gives us our shade. So that's something that I'm interested in to find out. And I'm sure that you guys will probably address it, but I can tell you that some of the neighbors that I have spoke to in my complex were totally taken aback that none of us had been notified of this until we got a letter from the state of Michigan talking about the possibility of the wetlands being, I don't want to say compromised, but being addressed, that there might be some change to it. So hopefully, you know, we'll get some questions answered that a lot of the homeowners, especially those of us that back up directly to that property, are worried about.
Thank you so much. Anybody else this evening that would like to speak to this agenda item while we're on the public hearing? Oh, sure, come on up.
My concern is the same there.
Okay. Yeah, come on up here. Love to hear your input on this.
Yeah, my name is Raymond Kolb. I'm 42899 Bradley Drive. And I'm right next door to Eric, to the west.
Okay.
One door. Same thing. I came up earlier and we seen the plot paper at the planning, and they told me this was all wetlands. And I was under the understanding you can't develop wetlands, but do they have some way they can trade off, you know, use it and then replace it somewhere else? I don't know the law on that, but yeah, it's basically, if you have the number, you know, and they're not going to disturb this, how many feet is that? And, you know, just more information is what I like to have, to see that the woods aren't gone.
Yep. Thank you so much.
There's a lot of wildlife.
Thank you. Director Power, do we have anybody on Zoom this evening that is participating?
There are two people in Zoom, and there's a Lisa and a Liz, and I know that Ms. Thomas, that'd be Liz, is involved with the second item on the agenda, so I'm guessing no comments from her on this, but feel free, either of you, to speak if you have anything you'd like to add on this. Feel free to raise your remote hand, type in the chat. use the Q&A. Otherwise, going once, going twice, we will assume there's no comments from them tonight.
Right. We'll do one more call for any other public comment regarding this agenda item. All right, seeing as we have none, do we have a motion to close the public hearing?
I move that we close public hearing.
Support. We have motion to close the public hearing by Commissioner Cullen, support by Commissioner Grant. Have any comments or discussion regarding the motion? Seeing as we have none, all in favor to close the public hearing, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? And the public hearing is closed. All right, we are up to our first item underneath old business, which is the Cobblestone Creek Phase Villas revision, the special land use review. We have a presentation by you, Director Power.
Yes, thank you. It's a pretty light presentation on my part. We do have a remote attendee. Oh, and I'm sorry, through the chair, I do see that there's a hand raised, if you wouldn't mind. Because the public hearing's closed, we could have, if that was pertaining to the Brookwood project, we can have that in the comments in a later section if you'd like, or if you'd like to.
Would you like to reopen in the public hearing real briefly for the comment?
Sure, we can
Okay.
do that.
This time I'd ask for a motion to reopen the public hearing so we can add in additional comment from the public.
I will make a motion, we reopen it.
By Commissioner Budd, support by Commissioner Grant. All in favor to reopen the public hearing, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Seeing as none, we are reopened to additional comment.
Yes, thank you. I'm going to, Ms. Lodge, I will bring you in, and I see your comment in the chat. You live in Hickory Woods. Traffic on Tyler Road is very busy. I'm also going to invite you, if you'd like to speak. So I'm going to bring you in. And let's see if I can lower that hand.
Can you hear me?
Yes. Yes, we can. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Lisa Lodge. I live in Hickory Woods condominiums on Vine Street. I just want to echo what the other folks said from Hickory Woods about the concern over the tree line butting up to the property. But I also wanted to mention Tyler Road specifically. The traffic on Tyler Road has been very bad for a number of years. I've lived here for over 15 years. It's very difficult to turn left out of our condominium complex onto Tyler Road. For years, people have been saying that Van Buren Township was going to pave Morton Taylor Road. That's never been done at the four-way stop. There absolutely, positively needs to be a traffic light at Morton Taylor Road where the four-way stop is. We've got a brand new senior complex opening there on the corner. They're going to have traffic from that. This is going to add several hundred people or more living in this facility with only access to Tyler Road, and Tyler Road is the main, almost the only road between Haggerty and Belleville Road. And with building the new plant up on E-Course, or the new electrical plant that's going to have 2,500 jobs, Tyler Road will be extremely busy with traffic. So I just wanted to add in that I don't know if you've done a traffic study, or when you are going to be doing a traffic study, but I had talked to Kevin McNamara before he was elected to the board and mentioned this, and he basically told me that if he were elected, he would make sure that a traffic light was placed there. I'm hoping that that was not just an election promise that is going to be broken. I expect the promise to be kept. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Is there any other individuals on Zoom, Director Power?
There are not.
Great. I will make another call for any more comments, any statements from the public. Seeing as we have none, I have a motion to close the public hearing for a second time.
I'll make a motion to close the public hearing.
All right, and support?
Support.
A motion to close the public hearing by Commissioner Grant, support by Commissioner Cullen. Any discussion regarding the motion? Seeing as none, all in favor to close the public hearing, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? And the motion to close the public hearing passes. Right, we are back to old business item number 1, which would be Cobblestone Creek Phase Villas revision, special land use. Director Power?
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll just stay here for this. I would like to just kind of recount the review process leading up to this. On June 8th, there was a public hearing held for this, what's called a revision to a existing planned residential development. The applicant is Infinity Acquisitions LLC. And the owner of the property at the time of the application last year was CA Kime. The specific 6.88 acre property in question is now owned by Infinity Acquisitions. But the request was to change that section of a phase of attached condominium units within the overall 117 acre Cobblestone Creek Planned Residential Development, or PRD project, which is on Huron River Drive, just east of Hoft Road, or south of Huron River Drive, east of Hoft Road. The streets affected are Chinkapin Drive and Pinewood Lane. And what you have here is a development that was planned 15 or 20 years ago, and CA Kime has built a substantial portion of the northern end of the development. The total project, and I have there's a slight change to the overall scope of the project with this change that's proposed at this time. The current project is approved to include 104 attached housing units in 26 buildings, and the proposed PRD as amended is to include 96 units, including 44 units already constructed and 52 proposed, in 25 buildings, which include the 12 two-story buildings already constructed, and 13 buildings, some of which have a second floor loft that are proposed. So we, in our zoning ordinance under the rules for planned residential developments, we require that changes to an existing PRD undergo the same process unless it's an extremely minor change as the original PRD. So we've had to, in fact, review this as a special land use format for the amended preliminary PRD plan and agreement. So the Planning Commission's request tonight is following tabling this review in June to revisit the request and to consider acting on the special land use recommendation to the Township Board and the preliminary plan recommendation to the Township Board. If those two actions are taken up and approved by the board, then at a later date, the Planning Commission will review a final PRD plan and agreement, which will be again recommended to the Township Board to kind of formalize and finalize the changes to the PRD agreement. The applicant since June has submitted a first amendment to the PRD agreement, revised set of plans to reflect some of the comments that were made by staff at that time, a master deed and an access easement, and some supplemental submittals. So I know Ms. Thomas is here. I know that Mr. Suave is about to enter. So I think at this point, I would like to defer to Vidya Krishnan to go over the comments she had on this request from her reports that are in your packet tonight.
Thank you, Director Power. As Director Power summarized, this project appeared before you for a public hearing in June earlier this year. At the time, it was tabled because the Planning Commission had some questions and concerns that needed to be addressed, not excluding the master deed and bylaws that needed to be amended to come before you. So a brief recap, the Cobblestone Creek PRD was originally approved in 2004, and then in the recession of 2008, the project was never completed. At the time, phase 2 remained unfinished with only 12 out of the 26 buildings being completed. Infinity Acquisitions subsequently acquired the rest of the area that was left over, and at this time, they are proposing 52 units within 13 additional buildings. So this is a significant amendment to the original PRD, which per our ordinance requires them to go through the whole PRD and special land use approval process again. So they will have to appear before the Planning Commission twice and the Board of Trustees twice. With regard to the specific, the general standards for special land use review for the project, the use of the land is being promoted in a socially and economically desirable manner. The street layouts, the utilities, everything was laid out in 2004. So at this time, completion of the project finally puts a finish to this existing PRD and provides for much necessary attached housing within that development. The detached homes were completed, the attached homes were never completed, so this project will lead to that. It is compatible with the adjacent uses of land. It is close to other 2 and 4 unit buildings that have been constructed within that area itself. It's not going to strain the existing utility or the capacity of services for the township because all the utilities were originally laid out. No trees are being removed as part of the proposal, and an extensive amended landscape plan has been submitted proposing a lot of new vegetations, trees, perennials, shrubs, flowers in order to enhance all of the attached units area. This is a valid exercise of the township's police power to consider a special land use approval at this time. The PRD is governed by specific design standards, which I have reviewed in my site plan review letter, which is a separate review letter. So at this time, since the amended PRD has to go through a special land use process, it is our recommendation that the PRD amendment meets the generalized conditions for special land use approval, and we would recommend that the Planning Commission recommend preliminary amended PRD approval to the Township Board of Trustees, subject to approval of the utility and stormwater detention plan by the Township Engineer in Wayne County, if required, in case Wayne County's requirements have changed since then and they expect the development to comply with their new standards, and compliance with all conditions of preliminary PRD amendment approval, that is the site design requirements. So these plans will be revised and presented before the Board of Trustees. Once completed, the applicant will have to finish up all the engineering, come back before you for final approval, just like every other site plan. However, since it's a PRD, it will have to go back before the Board of Trustees for a stamp on the final PRD amendment and the agreement. I would be happy to answer any questions you might have.
Thank you so much, Ms. Krishnan. All right, Director Power, this is on just the first item, number 1, correct, on the special land use review?
Yes,
We're
there are
gonna
two separate items,
We're gonna
yes.
separate the
Thank
two.
you. And so that doesn't really involve any engineer or fire department comments at this time.
You happen to see the applicant sneaking, or?
Mr. Suave is here from Infinity Acquisitions. If you'd like to speak to your request, feel free, or through the chair, if that's okay with you.
No, thank you so much. Good evening.
Name and address? Reno Suave with Infinity Homes and Company, or Infinity Acquisitions on behalf of the petitioner. Our office address is 42400 Grand River, Novi, Suite 112, 48375. Kind of bear with me a little bit. I'm just getting over a cold, so not COVID, not to be alarmed. So I got kind of a raspy voice. But yeah, we put our heads together on this. We were here before you guys in June, I think sometime in mid-June, had a number of administrative reviews with, videos and Dan's department. So I think we feel we're at a good point now where we have a pretty good plan set forward, and we're looking forward hopefully to facilitating the approval process and working with the board and the Board of Trustees, the Planning Commission, the Board of Trustees to get this project going. So pending approvals, we're looking at, these are the nature of the style of the construction of the unit. These will probably be built sometime. We're looking to break ground, hopefully pending approval sometime in probably March of next year. So, but I'm here to answer any questions you guys have. So,
Great. Thank you so much.
thank you.
If anybody in the public this evening that would like to speak to this agenda item, we're also going to have another section that's going to be regarding the preliminary plan approval. So you have another option at that time as well. All right. Do you have any questions or comments from anybody on the commission regarding this item this evening?
Mine would, I'm not familiar with this as much as everyone else. So I'm looking at the plan. This is sort of my first look at it, other than looking at it outside of this meeting. So it looks like it's a residential style change in the housing, going from like a 2-story, looks like, if I'm reading it right,
That's right.
to a single story. Okay.
Yeah.
That was your.
I don't know the history, but I just wanted to be clear. I want to be clear that
No, that's okay.
that's what I'm looking at. So
What was initially approved was two-story, basically townhomes. And there's
Right.
a couple different mixtures, a couple different plans within there. So we went through something, looking at this and we acquired it. We said, you know, what, this isn't really, we wanted to fit something that was fitting for the neighborhood. And even doing our research, we knew that single-story ranch houses and condos were in pretty high demand. There's actually a pretty big shortage of it within the township, other municipalities as well. So we want to do something that was kind of complementary to the neighborhood and still kind of keep some of the architectural features. So this is actually, it's not more of a less intrusive, I guess you could say, development proposal or use rather. So, and the good thing about it, if you look at the plan, is that there's always, when we've done these before in the past, you always have, it's kind of a hodgepodge. You might have two existing buildings. You might have a vacant pad in the center. This actually works out pretty good in the fact that you have the existing townhomes all to the north, and then you have the continuity of everything going southward where it's all the ranch style. So it does look like, when it's all said and done, it'll look like it's actually was designed for two separate phases, which in my opinion, I think is pretty good because you don't have other developments we've done where you might have two townhomes and you have a small ranch building in the center. So, but yeah, it's definitely, it's a residential use, obviously, and there's going to be, you know, mainly fourplexes and some fiveplexes, so.
Thanks.
Do you have any other questions, comments from anybody from the commission? No? Are we ready to take action on this agenda item?
Through the chair, I make a motion that we send to the township board, I believe is what the way it goes, right?
Yes.
To the township board,
Approval to the township.
to the township board, approval of the special land use for the project of Cobblestone Creek Villas revision for the site located on the south side of Huron River Drive, east of Heft Road. The area is subject of 6.88 acres between Chickpen Drive and Pinewood Lane. And parcel numbers, ID number V 125-83-114-0200-6700 and 13957 Chickpen Drive, ID parcel V 125-83-114-0200-28-000 as per the recommendations of the letter by staff of, I didn't write the date down.
The revised one would be the 8th
The 8th,
from my letter, and then Ms. Krishnen's is
October 8th,
no.
2022, and Ms. Krishner's letter of
May 11th,
May,
2022.
okay, May 11th, 2022. And then you did an update letter. Is that included on this?
Yes.
Site plan review letter. That's the special land use. You're good.
Did I get through it okay? Okay,
Yes, that's right. Yep.
Yes, good job.
okay.
Okay, support for Commissioner Cullen's motion.
Support.
I have a motion by Commissioner Cullen, support by Commissioner Grant. Do you have any comments or discussion regarding the motion?
I do, and I'm sorry,
No,
through the
it's-
chair.
yes.
My letter was November 8th, not October 8th.
Oh.
Just minor point. Yep.
Amend that motion to November 8th.
Support.
All right, have a roll call, please, at this time.
Grant,
Here? Aye.
Yes.
Yes.
Bud,
Yes.
Brian Cullen,
Yes.
Brian Kelly.
Yes. All right, and the special land use recommendation has been approved. That'll bring us to item number 2, Cobblestone Creek Villas Revision Preliminary Plan Review. Back to you again, Director Power.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And because we're now getting into some of the content of the plans, I will just use this opportunity to comment on some of the conditions that were related to the plans that warranted the tabling on June 8th and to kind of recount some of the things that have been submitted since then. And then I'll defer to our other reviewing consultants. On June 8th, as part of this revision to the plan, the Planning Commission asked for the applicant to submit a revised PRD agreement document that has been provided. You asked for limits on clarity on limits of creating a new phase for the public improvements of the previous phase or until those improvements are complete. One of the things that you'll see in the PRD agreement that was submitted as part of this concept was that the applicant is creating a master association that binds the two existing associations together that will account for any remaining final wearing course on pavement and some other improvements that are being sorted among the associations. So as far as the public improvements go, most of them are already in place, but to the extent that they're not, they will be handled by a master association. That speaks to the bonding requirements for the project as well that the Planning Commission had asked about. The PRD agreement, we had spoken with the township attorney, and there was a question about the eligibility for this new phase to use the overarching PRD agreement. The first revision to the PRD agreement does cover that because it speaks to the genesis of the overall plan and the new development by this project and how they bind together. They requested modifications, which I know Ms. Christian will go over, they're stated clearly in the revised PRD agreement to the extent they're not consistent with the original PRD. The new condominium documents, including a master deed and bylaws, have been submitted, as well as the PRD agreement revision. Those are being reviewed right now by the township attorney, and they'll be the review will be completed before we bring the final PRD agreement to the Board of Trustees. And finally, there was a request to provide some justification on the feasibility of side entry garages. And I will point out, if we didn't already, that the applicant did provide a letter, an explanatory letter with some of that justification. And some of these are listed on the plans as well. Their letter is dated September 28th, 2022, and it's on page 34 of your print packet. So just to point out some of the updates that were made with the plans and submittals since the first review of the preliminary plan. And in my report, I also mentioned that the Planning Commission should confirm those tabling conditions have been met or feel comfortable that they have. And then a couple of conditions that just come from the zoning ordinance language, that prior to final plan approval, a written response from myself, the township attorney, township engineer, and township planner regarding the master deed shall be provided as part of the final plans, master deed, and amended PRD agreement for the project. This is a comment from the fire marshal. Mailboxes and fire hydrants shall be placed on the same side of the street, and on street parking shall be limited to only the one side of the street opposite these items. So that helps to alleviate concern about emergency access. And then finally, per the requirements of attached residential condominium units under section 6.113 of the zoning ordinance, that the attached units must comply with applicable requirements for single-family attached dwellings under section 5.116 of the zoning ordinance. So just some additional comments on the conditions on the site plan that will need to be verified with the final plan submittal at a later date.
Thank you so much, Director Power. Ms. Christian.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll go over the site plan review comments in brief. Director Power, if you could just zoom in on the areas of the deviations as I go over them. So at this time, the applicant's proposal is 52 units within 13 buildings, which reduces the overall density of this project by about 8 units. At the time of approval, a minimum of 30% of the gross site area was required to be preserved as open space. The applicant at this time is preserving 40.8% of dedicated open space. So they have increased beyond what was originally proposed. With the original PRD density calculations, the site is originally zoned R1A single-family residential. They would have been allowed a total of 203 units. With a maximum density bonus of 30%, that would allow them 264 units, but the original plan was approved with a density bonus of 27%, which resulted in 258 units, which was still within the 30%. The applicant at this time has reduced the density from 27% to 23%, and they're going to build 250 units. So basically, they're reducing the original density that was approved for the site. All of the site plan required details are on the plan at this time. As a PRD, the most important feature of a PRD is it allows the Planning Commission and the Township Board of Trustees to grant deviations from the strict provisions of the ordinance. They are not qualified as variances, they are listed as deviations in the PRD agreement. At this time, the applicant is requesting the following additional deviations to the original PRD. The minimum required setback along an internal road is 25 feet. If you look at proposed building A, it is located at a setback of 20 feet. And this is because there is, Director Power, could you point out building 8 in the rear? It's at the top left. This is due to an existing stormwater easement in the rear yard, which prevents the building from going any further back. They have to be closer to the front because they cannot be within the stormwater easement. So instead of 25 feet, they're going to be 20 feet from the street because they can't push the building any further back. Yeah, the top left one, Dan, the cross-hatched one. Yep, that's building 8. Yes, that one. Buildings 4 and 5 are located at a distance of 15 and 17.5 feet from Whitewood Circle. That is at the southeast corner of the map that you see. The street is located along their side or rear. The buildings still comply with the front yard setback and also maintain the required 20-foot separation. So although the setback distance, which is basically, we are talking about buildings 5 and building, we have to scroll further down. The distance from Whitewood Circle, which is over here, yes, this distance is 17.5 and this distance is 15. These are the two deviations being sought by the applicant. They still meet the front yard setback requirement, and the way the applicant's buildings are placed, they would still maintain approximately 32 to 34 feet from the actual paved roadway. They are still well away from the pavement itself, but they do not meet the minimum setback on that side of the building, that corner alone, just a corner of both buildings don't meet. The third deviation they're requesting is the minimum required floor area for units in the R1A single family residential district is 1,800 square feet. When the original PRD was approved, most of the units complied with the standard. A deviation was granted for a few units to be 1,689 square feet. That was the minimum. At this time, some of the units that are being proposed by the applicant, the unit sizes vary between 1,266 square feet to 1,633 square feet. They are more compact. This is not unusual. Larger unit sizes were prevalent at the time the original Cobblestone Creek was approved in 2004, but with the progression of time, unit sizes and residential dwelling units have gotten smaller in size. We have now efficiency units, we have loft units. So even under the building codes, the size of the residential units has gone down significantly. More people seem to like living in more smaller, compact spaces. So the applicant is designing something to cater to that demographic. Stormwater detention and engineering issues, I shall defer to the township's engineer. The PRD amendment is not altering any of the street layout. All the street layouts are all fixed as they are currently. With regard to sidewalks, the sidewalk stops as a stub where the existing attached units stop. The applicant is going to be putting sidewalks along the frontage of all streets where the new buildings are going to go, and there are going to be sidewalk connections to the front of the buildings. With regard to master deed and bylaws, I defer to the township attorney. I have reviewed it, and I have a whole bunch of corrections that I have included from a planning standpoint, but the township attorney will ensure that it meets the legal language that is required to be in the documents. There is a detailed landscape plan as part. There is no vegetation being removed, as I had previously summarized. There is pretty extensive landscaping proposed to be installed for the site, which will definitely enhance its appearance and is in keeping, if not a level above what was previously approved for the original Cobblestone Creek. As to architecture, the applicant did submit details for the proposed 4 and 6 unit buildings. Per the ordinance, 80% of the front facade wall shall be brick or stone, and all other exterior walls shall be faced with brick or stone from the finished grade to the top of the first-story wall. Now, if you look at the elevations proposed by the applicant, the front facade almost entirely, 90 to 95%, is going to be brick. And it will have cedar shake and vinyl siding with decorative garage doors. The side and rear elevations do include brick for the entire first-story height, up till the first story, and only vinyl siding above that. These are ranch units. So the predominant building material for all of it is going to be brick. The original plan included side entry garages on every building that was attached. If you look at some of the existing buildings that were built, the few that were built, the 12, they all have side entry garages. The proposed layout is not accommodating any side entry garages. At the time the applicant came before you in June, we were going through our discussion for side entry garages in detail. There was a concern that we do not want to have units with garages right in front and the front door hidden somewhere in the back, and the Planning Commission discussed the possibility that if you're going to have front entry garages, at least the garage should not be prominent, projecting out all the way into the front, and should be recessed. In response, the applicant did give a written summary as to why they cannot accommodate side entry garages. It would basically take out almost half the units that are on this property because they will not have enough turn radii to make that happen. So the applicant, at this time, the proposed elevations show the applicant attempted to make some revisions. So the garage is projecting about 8.3 feet in front of the dwelling entrance rather than the full 20-foot length. It's like more than half of the garage is actually going to be recessed. It's not going to be as obvious as it was on the original plan. This, once again, will be the fourth deviation that they are requesting as part of the PRD amendment agreement. There are no trees, so woodland and tree preservation permit is not required at this time. This existing PRD has been incomplete for a long time, as I've mentioned. I was around when it was originally approved in 2004, so I'm glad to finally see it being completed. The unit designs that is being proposed by Infinity Homes is designed to cater to a specific crowd that prefers ranch homes rather than two-story homes and not have steps inside. It is not a senior housing or anything. It is meant, it's open housing for anybody who wants to buy it. The applicant did take feedback from the Planning Commission in June and make a lot of changes. They were able to meet some of your concerns in terms of upgrading the building architecture quality material. They were unable to address the side entry garage issue. So they did their best by trying to push the garages a little bit further than what was originally proposed. We believe, based on the limitations of the site and the fact that the street layouts and all cannot be moved, and the applicant is lowering the density, increasing the amount of dedicated open space for this project, and completing a long incomplete project, it is our recommendation that preliminary amended PRD plan approval for Cobblestone Creek Villas be granted at this time, with the Planning Commission recommendation for approval of the requested site design and architectural deviations, so a sum total of 4 deviations, and corrections to the PRD agreement and review and approval of the amended PRD agreement by the Township Attorney. I'd be happy to answer if you had any questions.
Thank you so much. Mr. Cameron?
Yes, thank you. As reference in what you guys will have in your packets is our letter dated June 3rd, 2022. The applicant submitted plans at that time, which we did a full review on. However, when they resubmitted for some of the changes or comments, we reviewed those plans and there were no changes as far as engineering is concerned. So we were comfortable with leaving our letter dated June 3rd to go as part of this packet and part of this approval. Because this site was originally built out, not all the housing or not all the units, but because the site itself was built out back in 2004 and 5, there aren't a whole lot of changes when it comes to the infrastructure within the township. So I'll go through very quickly what we reviewed and the current layout of the site and things that may change slightly or will need some additional information on. But for the most part, the current site is operational as it comes to township-owned infrastructure, which includes the roads, water mains and water service, sanitary mains and sanitary service. So the water main system was built out per the plans from the 2004 approved plans. As far as everything, as we know, as the township knows, everything was done in accordance with those plans and is up and operational. The applicant plans, their plans confirm that there are no additional construction needs for the water main or changes for the water main. One thing that we did note in our comments is regarding the fire hydrant layout that is currently there. Because the units are going to change and because the layout of the units are going to change a little bit, we would recommend that the fire marshal approve the existing layouts of the hydrants, meet the standards at which they need, and if need be, they will need to get shifted per the new units. Other than that, the only change to the water main or water main service will be the existing taps into the building, which are standardly done by the building department. The same goes with the sanitary sewer. The sanitary sewer system was installed per the approved plans back during the original phase of the project. The only comments that we have in our letter is, again, about the sanitary structures and needing, if they need to be adjusted or they won't get moved, but any of the rims or the covers to be adjusted as part of the project. That would need to be detailed in the engineering plans. The storm sewer system, this complete storm sewer system was approved as part of the 2004 plans and installed as part of the overall project. What we did during our review was look at the overall impact to the impervious area. And because they're reducing the number of units, they're actually reducing the amount of roof space or paved space than what was originally designed for. There is one improvement that they're adding to the plans, and that is to extend one of the storm sewers on the west side, I guess it is, of the property to pick up some of the yard drainage in the backyards of one of those units. So we ask, as they get through preliminary, that they add the proper engineering profiles and everything that we would typically see in an engineering submittal for that storm sewer and structure. Other than that, the only other comment that we would have on the storm sewer is that the applicant should verify with the county that no improvements need to be made with the new storm sewer regulations. I don't believe there should be anything. As I said, it seems to meet the current standards. However, this is still a Wayne County issue to give full approval for moving forward. Other than that, everything else in the site, besides soil erosion and sedimentation control during construction, will need to be implemented per a plan that they need to supply during engineering review. But we don't offer any other comments and offer no objection to them moving forward into the final site plan and engineering approval process, subject to the minor comments that we have in our letter dated June 3rd, 2022.
Thank you so much. Bring us up to comments from our applicant at this point. If you have anything else you'd like to add this evening, or you're all set? Perfect. And then anything from anybody in the public this evening? Any comments, questions regarding this agenda item? Yes.
Not see any new comments or hands raised. Through the chair, I do have one item just just to mention, if you'd like to know, the architectural elevations were in the print packets, but just so you can see them, I know we didn't bring them up during the planning consultant's report, but this is just a standard elevation that was provided for this project. So otherwise, no further comments from me on this one.
Thank you, Director Power. Any questions, comments from any of the commissioners?
We, to make any comment on elevations at this point in time?
If you have questions on elevation, yes.
Yeah, I do it. So the bottom elevation, the only question I have, I mean, is that typical of all the units? Because it's very repetitive. I mean, starting on the right-hand side, it just repeats all the way to the end, except for the end where it has the bay window. Is this typical of all the units on this,
That's
in this
correct, sir.
PRD?
Correct. It's pretty typical multifamily. You don't typically get one layout, have some deviations to each elevation, and then it kind of repeats itself.
So the rest of the buildings look just like this?
That is correct.
Is this pretty, do you know, is this standard for these type of developments to have this repetition, this level of repetition? Would be my question.
So is that, do you have a question for Ms. Christian about
Yeah, I do,
whether it was
actually.
reviewed?
Is it standard? Well, it's typically what is proposed. We have been talking to Mr. Suave to get creative and try what he can, and they have upgraded the quality of the building materials. So just getting brick and cedar shingles is where we have reached at this point. Because of the layout of the streets within the existing subdivision, at least all of the buildings are not in one straight line. So hopefully when you see down the street, you're just not the exact concern we had when we discussed the garage issue. It's not going to be there, but yes, the buildings are going to look repetitive.
So this was discussed a while back?
We discussed it in June,
Okay,
yes.
I don't want to take it off in a different direction. So if it was something that,
I may have, Director Power, if I remember it, is this the one where the HOA, some of the members from the HOA appeared and discussed the reason why they wanted it similar?
Yes, there were members of the existing Cobblestone Creek Villas HOA present. And that's a good segue to Commissioner Grant's question, because I think if, Mr. Suave, if you could speak to that a little bit, your discussions on architecture with the existing HOA, their support for it, and perhaps because there is this very distinct change in at least the layout of the units, maybe some of the ways you're tying in with some of the materials like the brick. Could you speak a little bit to the?
Right, so before even coming back in front of the board and presenting this, we want to make sure, because I just found in our experience, when you get these projects that have been sitting for so long, such as this, have been sitting for almost 2 decades now, there's a high level of sensitivity with coming in, because everybody's so used to seeing just vacant land there, it just becomes part of the eye, right? Part of the visual eye, right? So we did our work with the association to make sure they were on board with everything. And, we brought them, initially we brought them 2 plans. We said, look, what do you guys prefer? Do you prefer us going single family, or would you prefer multifamily? And hands down, everybody did not want single family in there, which kind of touches on your point, Commissioner, as far as having like different elevations. And a single family development, you're 100% correct. You have different houses for each elevations, and we typically not like to put the same elevations next to each unit. But in multifamily, it's very common to see the repetitiveness of one building being the redundancy going forward. What kind of helps us out in some cases, that because there's a lot of curvature of the road, as mentioned, you're not looking down the street just seeing just a row of the same units. So what we did is the association was pretty adamant about, they wanted to try to match the existing brick colors. And keep in mind, this is going into 20 years later. We did our best, and we're going to do our best to make sure that we can match up the selections as close as possible to what's existing there. So we'll have some other additional meetings with them for them to approve our color facade finishes and whatnot, to make sure that they're on board with it, to say yes, this is going to match our neighborhood the best. Keeping in mind different sample run numbers and run numbers and whatnot are going to be very different, but we'll match it as closely as we can. So what we did here is just a couple things that we had input from not only the Planning Commission but also the board. The roof line was like an 812 pitch, if that makes any sense to anybody who doesn't know anything about architecture, but the 812 pitch is basically the steepness of the roof. So an 812 might be like this, and then a 1212 goes higher. What it does, it just creates more of like a, I guess you could say, grander elevation, higher roof lines. It doesn't look like it's like a flat roof line. So gives it just a better aesthetics from the street. And also too, we added the bay windows in. We initially had brick or vinyl above the garage, which we ended up changing to full brick. Put windows in the garage doors just to give it some architectural, I guess you could say an architectural flair, I guess. Added in the cedar shakes above there, just versus doing all vinyl. So I think that the community seems like they're more than happy with it. I was looking around, I don't see anybody from the HOA here, and they've been present at a few of the meetings here. But again, they're full support of it. They're looking to get this done. I think they're more excited about finally getting to see not only the neighborhood finished, but also not having to hit a bump every time they pull in the driveway now, because you're gonna have there'll eventually be a finished road there. So I think they're more excited about that than anything. So
Thank you so much. Do you have additional questions, Commissioner Grant?
No, I don't have questions. I just still think there's a lot of repetition starting at the right and moving all the way to the left, you know. But if this was already discussed, again, it's not.
We had those conversations, and
Okay, then I'm,
well,
if-
and
if you're good with that, I'm good.
and if
with
I
it.
remember, please somebody correct me if I'm wrong. When the HOA president came before us, they
Yeah.
discussed the importance of maintaining the repetitiveness and having the units, since they're multifamily, keeping them very similar. And that's what the HOA was asking for when they came before us.
Okay.
So we're doing some.
the opposite, isn't it? Usually they're always so
Correct. They
they're the
want-
ones who are saying just the opposite of what the planning commission is. So when Director Power and I were speaking, I said the biggest challenge we have is to convince the neighbors and not so much the commissioners. You know, the planning commission and the board of directors. So
Yep, so, any other questions, comments from any of the commissioners? Director Power, I thought you were gonna say something. No.
For a change.
All right, are we ready to take action on this agenda item this evening?
I guess I gotta try this again.
Yes, you're gonna get some practice.
Through the chair, I would like to make a motion to recommend the preliminary condominium site plan to the Township Board of Trustees for Cobblestone Creek Villas revision. For the site located south side of Huron River Drive, east of Heft Road, in the area of 6.88 acres, located on Chickapin Drive and Pinewood Lane between 13687 Pinewood Lane. ID V 12583114020 0067 and 13957 Chickapin Drive. Parcel ID number V 125831140200028 with the conditions established by the letter of staff on 11/3/22, of the McKenna letter dated 11/19/22, and the Fishbeck letter dated 6/3/22, with the fire marshal approval of the fire hydrant layout. I believe that's all I have to.
Yes.
Just a quick correction, my letter is dated October 19th.
October 19th.
October 19th, and I would also recommend that you add in a specific statement that you're recommending approval of all 4 PRD deviations being sought.
All for adding to the motion an amend, or a correction of McKenna letter dated October 19th, 2022, and the 4 recommended deviations from the original PRD as presented.
I'll support that.
Yeah, motion by Commissioner Cullen, support by Commissioner Budd. Any comments or discussions? I have one one minor thing on it, or a requested amendment. I believe we needed to confirm that the tabled items had been met. Is that one of our items as well, Director Bauer?
Yes, and you can, in summary, do that if you'd like. That was just a recommendation in my report.
Okay. All right. That was my only comment I had.
So I have to amend the,
You don't have to, just that we
Okay.
could make it.
because it was part of his report, right, of
Correct.
staff?
Correct.
See, okay, I got it.
You got it. You did great. All right. Do you have any other comments or discussion? Seeing as we have none, have a roll call, please.
Bud?
Yes.
Bernie Grant?
Yes.
Brian Cullen?
Yes.
Brian Kelly?
Yes. All right, and the amendment is approved. Thank you for coming out this evening.
The next thing from here would be, what, we'll go to Board of Trustees then from here?
Board of Trustees will review the recommendation for the special land use and the preliminary plan, and at a later date, the Board of Trustees will review the final plan, and both the Planning Commission and the Board of Trustees will review the final plan and the final version of the PRD agreement. Okay.
Yep, thank you. Have a great night. We are up to new business, item 1. Chris Gardner, SB Investments LP with Brookwood, requesting special land use review. Director Powers?
Yes, thank you. Paul will finally get to present soon. The agenda is set up at this point where there's 2 new business items for the Brookwood project. One is the review of the special land use request, and then one is the review of the preliminary site plan. I mentioned earlier that based on this, the kind of the scope of this project, some of the questions that I know the commissioners will have, the commissioners may opt to kind of have our reviewing consultants here for questions and comments, but not to go through their full extent of their reports, but rather I'll summarize some of the issues that come up in the reports at this time, and give the applicant a chance to present, give the Planning Commission a chance to express their comments or questions at this time, and then we can come back with a more final version of the plans if that's what the Planning Commission desires. So I guess I would recommend we stick to the format of the meeting, which includes this special land use discussion and consideration of action or tabling by the Planning Commission, and then preliminary site plan consideration, and same thing, you can consider acting and approving it or tabling it tonight. So with that said, let me get into my overview of the special land use request. Just really broadly, any special land use in the township has general criteria. Under the Michigan Zoning Enabling Act and under our zoning ordinance, there are certain procedures for what we consider special land uses. And these are types of uses that don't necessarily fall into a clear category of a permitted use by right in a zoning district. And so there are additional thresholds for reviewing and approving these uses so that they can deal with the character of the surrounding area. So I'll go over the kinds of things that we're looking at generally for this special land use, and specific criteria also apply to the various identified special land uses in our zoning ordinance. And in this case, what we're talking about here is senior housing. Senior housing is a very specific type of special land use. There are assisted living and dependent senior housing facilities like you have at the Hampton Manor project, where there's assisted living units and memory care units. And then there are independent senior housing type uses, and those would include this type as well as the senior apartments that are going up on Belleville Road. So those 2 sets of criteria apply. You'll see these spoken to in the report by the planning consultant that's in your packet. With this being a special land use, you're looking at whether the project is socially and economically desirable as a use of land, whether it's necessary for public convenience in the area, whether it's compatible with adjacent land uses, whether it protects the public health, safety, and welfare of the area, whether it's served by adequate services and utilities, whether it has cohesion with the neighborhood, consideration of the environment and natural resources, whether it has harmony with the underlying zoning district, and whether regulating the use is a valid exercise of what's called the police power of the township. But specific to senior housing, additionally, there's requirements for open space and site area. There's requirements for floor area minimums. These projects have to be adjacent to a major thoroughfare, whether it's planned or currently a major thoroughfare. And we've gotten confirmation in this case that Tyler Road is a planned 120-foot right-of-way major thoroughfare. You consider limits on height. Senior housing projects can't exceed 40 feet in height, as well as setbacks. And with senior housing specifically, setbacks are based on the proximity of the project to its boundaries. So there's a 50-foot front, rear, and side yard setback requirement for the overall project that you consider. You look at things like building architecture. There are specific minimum architectural standards for these buildings. And they're a little bit different from the example you just saw with conventional attached housing that's not necessarily targeted to seniors. Senior housing has specific architectural requirements. There are limits on accessory buildings, and there are requirements for parking, landscaping, and signage. All of these things have been addressed in the letter from the planning consultant that's in your packet. There is a conditional recommendation for approval based on the findings of these general and specific special land use criteria. However, I would say that there are some important points that have been brought up with this project that I think will be brought up this evening that warrant at least further discussion of the site plan. And in considering further discussion of the site plan, I think it's appropriate to kind of review the special land use and site plan together and make a recommendation on both when you feel ready to do so. So with that being said, I'd invite you to ask if you'd like to hear more from our reviewing consultants, or otherwise you can kind of discuss, and then I can bring in the site plan aspect, and the applicant can present the site plan.
Any preference from any of the members of the board?
It's fine with me.
Okay, I know we have a lot of questions. It's quite a big project at this point. I think a lot of our questions that are going to come up have more so to do with the preliminary site plan. And I don't think, from the board standpoint, that we're going to be ready to take action this evening with missing 3 of the other members. So I think it might be better if we look at tabling this, allow us to move to the next item, and then we can allow a presentation from the applicant, if that would work. And then we can ask questions from staff for any. Is that an okay format? Is that, the board members agree?
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay, so at this point, ask for a motion to table this agenda item.
I make a motion, we table the item for the special land use.
I support.
Motion to table the special land use item. Commissioner,
Yeah, and excuse me, also listing that it's for LIP Brookwood.
for LP Brookwood. Support, or a motion by Commissioner Budd, support by Commissioner Grant. Any discussions regarding the item? Seeing none, all in favor to table this item, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? And we are tabling item number 1, the special land use review at this time. Director Power, that we are on to item number 2, preliminary site plan review.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair. I will go into some more specifics of the site plan. Not many specifics, but just some more of the aspects of things we're looking at with the conventional site plan component of the project. Again, I want to say a lot of the design is based on some of the physical constraints of the site. There are a lot of wetlands, and also I should mention, if I haven't already, I don't think I have, but the applicant has worked extensively to coordinate with nearby homeowners associations, Charter Club, Walden Woods, and not Andover Farms, Hickory Woods specifically. Andover Farms is a little ways down the road, but they've also been looped in on the project. But there has been a lot of feedback that has led to the design decisions to this point. I think there are certainly still some things that need to be addressed and clarified. But that being said, your report from the planning consultant and the township engineer and the fire marshal cover the basis of various aspects of what the zoning ordinance requires for site plan review. On the zoning and use, again, this is an RM, multifamily residential zone site, which allows senior housing as a special land use. The submittal for these plans was extensive. There's a fairly large plan set that you have in print form, and that's only a portion of the overall set that was created. So there's been a lot of design work that's been done. So the site plan submittal was certainly complete. There are lot area requirements and dimensional requirements that we always look at with site plan reviews that have been addressed. We also look at things like access and traffic generation. I know traffic was a major topic of concern. Again, there was a traffic impact study performed by Wade Trim that there was at this time no recommendation, and this is kind of the main point of the takeaway from the studies, that no further improvements are needed to accommodate the additional vehicle trips from the proposed Brookwood residential development at this time. I think there's certainly a good discussion to be had about continued growth in the area, but just know that at least with this preliminary traffic impact study that staff received, that is the recommendation that was provided. Also with traffic generation and circulation, we also look at the ingress and egress into and out of the site. Again, because of the constraints, there is only there's one boulevard approach onto Tyler Road, which does functionally create two emergency access points, because what you'll see is that the two entries into the project, if something did happen on one side of the project, there would be an ability to use the other side of the boulevard for emergency access. So it's a 20 plus foot wide lane on both sides of that boulevard. But otherwise, the site circulation is basically a loop around the site. We also look at parking. I don't have many notes on the parking here. I mentioned the total number of parking spaces earlier. There's about 20 spaces in the form of parking adjacent to the streets, in addition to the 264 spaces that are in garages. There's extensive landscaping in the project. We did have one public comment already about a tweak to the landscaping by the units that are on the east end of the site, and the applicant has been amenable to that. But in addition to the landscaping, there's a fair amount of open space and wetland preservation. Utilities are another topic. There's a stormwater design that goes with any project. And this stormwater network involves a series of detention basins. And there's a water main and sanitary sewer layout that, again, routes those utility connections down to Tyler Road. One of the things that's involved with that is that because of the difficulty with connecting sanitary sewer through the wetlands to the north to the adjacent Hickory Woods project, which would have been involving a gravity treatment of the sanitary. What instead has to happen, because that crossing is not being proposed by the applicant, is that they're routing all that sanitary to the south to where it will have to be pumped under a water main on Tyler Road. So a pump station is part of the proposed sanitary design. And so these are issues that are kind of part and parcel with the idea that the project does not connect out to the north, but there's some justification for that from the applicant. Building architecture, these are units that are, again, 2, 4, and 6-plex units. You see that they really emphasize side entry garages in this project. Along with that, there is the issue that there are, the way that the project is designed currently involves a lot of shared driveways. And that's something that I know we've brought up, I've brought up to the applicant as something to take another look at, to see if there's a way to separate out even where those side entry garages, to provide some separation there. So that's another issue that the applicant is looking into. So those are kind of the basic pieces of the issues that we're looking at from a site plan standpoint with our staff reports. I'm sure if you wanted to get into more detail, Mr. Kamer, Ms. Christian would be happy to go into those more in depth. And there's also some comments from the fire marshal in your packet that I can speak to.
Okay, thank you so much, Director Power. Kind of a little, how far, Director Power, because I know we have a presentation from the applicant, and since we're short several board members this evening, I'd kind of like to hold a full report from being presented twice. So
Sounds good. I would just like to add a few things to Director Power. The applicant approached the township a long time ago with regard to, even at the introductory phase itself, the applicant was aware that traffic is a concern, natural feature preservation is a concern. However, the parcel is zoned RM multiple family residential. So having multiple family residential use is a principal permitted use in the site. The reason the applicant needs special land use approval is because it's a senior independent living. We had initially had discussions with the applicant about the possibility to go out into Morton Taylor Road as a secondary means of access for emergency. They did their due diligence. They worked extensively with Eagle, former MDEQ, and that whole area is a bunch of regulated wetlands, and Eagle was not amenable to them cutting through wetlands in order to get to Morton Taylor. They said absolutely not. They have lots of wetlands and wooded area to the north of the site. It did not make sense to disturb those areas to maintain the integrity of the existing wooded areas, so they left that alone. The township encourages cross-access with other developments. So logically, they should have been able to connect to Hickory Woods to the east, but Hickory Woods, at the time it was designed, was not designed with a stub to which the applicant can connect. So they really ran out of options. There is no other option for them except to go in and out of Tyler Road itself. So at that point of time, they did design the boulevard design in order to meet the fire department's requirements also for emergency access, and to be, if a portion of the development got shut down, that they would also have access through other portions of it. The applicant was aware, and I believe they made their best effort to find out from Wayne County, but as we know, the township has attempted to work with Wayne County forever to try for a light at the corner of Morton Taylor and Tyler. This is not the first time it's come up. It's come up multiple times. The township has approached Wayne County repeatedly, even when Hampton Manor went in. And the roads are not owned by the township. So the township, even though we know that a light over there would be helpful, can do nothing to get it in except keep trying to work with Wayne County. And as of now, Wayne County is not responsive to putting a light at that intersection. I know the applicant has also approached Wayne County, but it's not really within their control either. They can only ask the county, and it's up to the county and the county's budgets whether they decide to put a light in there or not. But, at least one of the residents had commented that on Zoom also, that there was a concern that, a light should have been put in at that intersection. That's always been on the township's mind, to try and get a light there, because a four-way stop is not the most efficient over there, but we simply cannot get the county to see it our way, that a light is actually needed over there. Hopefully, with more development coming in, at some point of time, the county's own traffic counts will show that we need to put a light in there. But until then, it's not a road within the township's jurisdiction or the applicant's power to go and put a light in there at that corner. The best they can do is design the boulevard. Doesn't make sense to restrict turn movements because it's an independent senior living. To say no right turn, you're actually creating more problems at the intersections at either end, or turn around into the neighbors' driveways, which is not what we want. So I just wanted the members of the audience, those who are listening on Zoom, and the Planning Commission to be aware that we have been trying to work with the applicant for a really long time, and they have tried their best to come up with a design that would actually meet our ordinance requirements and address the concerns for natural features preservation of trees, wetlands. They also have lots of other entities in play. You have Eagle, you have Wayne County, there are a lot of entities over here. So within the limitations, the applicants is trying to work, and the buildings that they have proposed are with the best effort to try and meet all of our ordinance requirements for senior housing as was adopted by the township. So I'd be happy to answer any questions that might arise further once the applicant makes their presentation.
Okay, thank you so much. Mr. Cameron, would you like to speak, or would you like me to?
Nope,
on.
not unless, you know, I think Ms. Christian put it perfectly. To speak just more on the traffic, I mean, Wayne County looks at specific numbers, right? They're called warrants. Is it warranted? And the county takes into account those numbers that are done with traffic studies by traffic engineers. And that's the value that they use. So they're not out here every day, and I understand that, you know, residents' concerns, but they're not out there every day, and they can only kind of base it on those numbers. So as more development comes in and those traffic numbers get higher, or then it's, you know, on the township to continue to try to push for that. But again, it is not the township's ultimate decision as to what goes in at that intersection at Morton, Taylor, and Tyler. So I will leave it there, and if there's any questions after the applicant comes up and says anything, I'm happy to answer anything.
Okay, thank you so much. All right, somebody from the applicant, would they like to speak regarding the agenda? Go over.
I am having some issues with getting your format on the screen. It's a PDF, and that's. Do you have one? That would be excellent. Thank you. It's a lifesaver, because this is surprising me. Probably, what's it? PC meeting? Great. Hopefully this will work. What's that all about? See it. And there you go. So just use the arrows and you should be in good shape.
I don't have to move anything. I think I'm just doing an intro. Okay. Good evening, everyone. My name is Chris Garner, Brookwood Senior Development and Senior Living. Thanks for taking the time and presentation. We'd like to get this project moving forward. I know we have a lot of steps to go, but just some background. Our group is in the process of 5 developments right now. The Taylor project is constructed as we speak. The Fenton Township project, we're pretty excited that we're breaking ground here in the next month. And the Superior Township is under site plan submittal in December. And then the Ash Township, which is down by Monroe, I always got to say that because everybody goes, Ash, where's Ash at? That is also, we're looking at getting approval or getting a submittal in December. So as the board knows, we're probably 2 years into this? No, year and a half.
Oh, a year and a half.
Year and a half into getting this project going in Van Buren. So it's, and as has been mentioned, there's just a ton of different government entities that we had to deal with, and then the design, and we've made every effort to meet all the criteria. So I'm going to turn it over to Luke Bonner to finish the presentation and give you more in depth and explain more. Thanks.
Good evening, Commissioners. Thank you for having us this evening. Yeah, it's been about a year and a half of us working on this project, and I do want to say before I introduce the team that your team at the Township has been extraordinarily helpful, very consultative, and has worked with us in a very problem-solving orientation, which has been great. The property is definitely challenged, and I'll get into that in a second, but it's actually laying out very nicely in terms of what we think we'll be able to offer future residents. Just a quick introduction of our team. I'm Luke Bonner with the Bonner Advisory Group, 1054 South Main, Ann Arbor, Michigan. Joined by Hobbs and Black as the architect. We've got Josh Stasko and Tom Dillenbeck here. Hobbs in particular, because they have a senior design studio. So that is the reason why we wanted to work with them. Veronica Clark is here from Wade Trim. She's driven the furthest from Holland to be here tonight. So when she saw that it was being tabled, her head sank and her shoulders drooped. We'll make her colleague who lives much closer come to the next meeting. And of course, Chris Garner, owner and CEO of Brookwood Senior Communities, and also not here is Gritter Real Estate Services. We're the real estate consultant on the project. You've seen the site plan. Just to give you an idea of what we look for in properties. Number one, we look for really good communities, which we believe Van Buren Township has been and continues to be. Based on the level of development that you have here, even the corporate development, from the new battery plant to Subaru's R&D facility to historically the Visteon campus that's here. It's very attractive. It's very close to I-94 as well, close to the airport, close to Ann Arbor. So we like that location for your community from that perspective. Then we look at sites that have great natural features. All of the sites that we're working on have something with them, for better or for worse, that we're working through, but we think in the end those are great amenities for our residents. And then obviously we look at zoning. So we want to do something that is compatible with zoning. We never try to shove a square peg into a round hole. And so this site definitely fit a lot of those criteria. We also, when we approach our projects, we do take a lot of interest and we put in a lot of effort to talk to neighboring residents. And I do apologize to the folks that are here tonight that are seeing this for the first time. We do our best. In this case in particular, we reached out to the neighboring HOAs, and we do rely on those HOAs, in terms of the presidents of the boards that we present to. That's who we give our information to as best we can, and then hope that it's distributed at some point. We've had probably no less than 6 meetings with HOA members in the surrounding neighborhoods. We never went down Morton Taylor Road, though. We didn't knock on anyone's door either to say, hey, we're here. So I do apologize for that. As you can at least see from the site plan, I want to call it a few things. The shaded areas are the wetland areas. We are generally completely staying out of those altogether. We did apply for an Eagle wetland permit. It was a minor permit because we are building a stormwater discharge structure into a small portion of a wetland. It's impacting, I believe, 0.25 acres or less. So there was a 30-day review period by Eagle, followed by a 20-day public comment period by Eagle for that particular item. Recently, within the last week, we've engaged with additional conversations with Eagle, kind of about what do we do next on the site. And that goes back to an April, well, I guess it was March, site walk that we had with Eagle. One of the things the township had asked us to do was look at that secondary connection point. That whole process took us about 6 or 7 months because we did actually go along Morton Taylor Road and put several parcels under contract so that we could begin due diligence on those parcels. Eagle came out and did a site walk, and what we essentially have here is very high quality wooded wetlands. So there was very much an absolutely not, you're not putting a road through there. And so the other portion that's come up this past week is that Eagle, in regard to our permit, is actually more interested in having us placing a conservation easement over the northern part of the property, which is again that high quality wooded wetland area, which gets into some of the utility issues, which I'll cover in a second. So for the residents on Morton Taylor Road, your property values are gonna hopefully stay where they're at or increase because the property behind you will never be touched. Because it'll be placed into a conservation easement going forward. And then one last thing, actually a couple more things on the site plan. The question about are the trees going to stay along the eastern edge? So right now the question is yes. So there's no interest in disturbing any of the vegetation along the property line. I'm only saying as of right now because we haven't done a full grading plan. So I don't know if a grading plan is going to make us, have to remove a handful of trees, but if we do, we'll put something back that'll replace, what was there before. Probably not as mature, but we'll put something back. But right now the goal is to not touch anything along the property line, and it looks like we might be able to do that. Just a quick look at the units. This is our clubhouse. So the clubhouse and all of the other units from a material standpoint are brick, stone, or some kind of cement board siding. to look more like a wood, a natural wood siding. This is a independent, active senior residential community. It will be age restricted to 55 and over. A key component of our communities is the activities that happen in the clubhouse. We have a lot of programming that comes through there. This is not an assisted living, memory care, or any kind of skilled nursing care, but we do have a series of service providers that work through the management company in the clubhouse to provide different services to residents when they're interested. So just to give you a look at the style of unit, typically when you're seeing senior product, it's either some kind of stack product or it's a single building, almost like a hotel with a series of services. Those typically are your skilled nursing, your assisted living. There isn't a lot of single-story senior product that's available on a long-term lease because all senior products are basically a lease situation. So we feel that we're offering something new to the market in terms of offering a long-term lease situation, which provides more flexibility versus senior products that are condominium style that you have to purchase. So we're providing these on a long-term lease situation. This is a 4-unit building. This is something else that when we designed this, we got a lot of feedback from the township team about, one, they wanted to see varying elevations. They didn't want to see the same thing over and over again. And they also wanted to eliminate the amount of garages that were facing the public street area. So we turned a lot of garages sideways and backwards and changed the elevations in and out to make sure that there was not that repetition and the street had a good varying look to it. This is an example of a corner unit. And then another example of a 2-unit building as well. As you can see in this case, the garage actually pops out in this scenario. So some of the stats on the project: 132 units. There's 7 6-unit buildings. There's 17 4-unit buildings, and there's 11 2-unit buildings. We do have, again, like those varying elevations and driveway locations and garage locations. Brick, stone, cement board siding is the materials. I think we meet or either exceed township ordinance. The site's 44 acres, so from a density standpoint, we're about 3 units per acre versus if we did straight multifamily, which was never a consideration for us, but I think a straight multifamily allowed for up to 10 units per acre from a density standpoint, and we're 3. We are very much excited about the wetlands, even though it's taken us quite a bit of time to work through all of that. We have almost 12 acres of preserved wetlands on the site. 10.5 acres of general open space. That's the ponds, the grass areas. We also are connecting the neighborhood through a walkway to make sure, again, that it's very active. And then the trees and shrubs and the parking space I actually have wrong. It's from another project. Dan was right. I think it was 264 plus an additional parking for clubhouse and visitors. So just a few notes in terms of this exploratory process that we went through. We actually went through 15 variations of site plan combinations for a lot of reasons. One, it was wetlands were an issue, density. So we did hear from the township and from the homeowners associations about density. We actually started this project at 190 units. We're now down to 132. We did spend a lot of time exploring that connection out to Morton Taylor. And as sort of compensation for not doing that, I know it's already been discussed, we widened the boulevard entryways for 2-way traffic. In the event one side gets closed down, you can still operate 2-way traffic out of the other side. And also from a fire protection perspective, we are sprinkling the units as well. That's something the fire chief asked us to do given the scenario with the entry point. We have the Eagle review letter, which actually we also submitted. That's an April 1st letter. So getting back to that utility connection between the water and sanitary, I know that from a best practice standpoint, it's ideal to have a full connection up through the north of our site and connecting out to the next neighborhood. What's causing us kind of distress from that is the fact that Eagle wants a conservation easement on that property. So there's actually two factors. One, it's going through a future conservation easement, which we really can't do. And then secondly, it would actually be connecting over into the Hickory Woods property. And that northern 10 acres of Hickory Woods is actually platted for development. So locations for that never really seem to match up because utility connections would be going where potential footprints of future buildings would be. And then we'd also have the issue of going through a conservation easement. But again, these are all things that we have, consistently looked at. The team's been, extremely consultative from that standpoint, which we really appreciate. And we don't often get everywhere we do projects. There's one issue that came up this week with Dan, and that was about the separation of driveways because of the way we started to orient the driveways so that the garages weren't facing the street. We have several examples where the garages face each other and there's a shared driveway between units. And there was a request that there be some kind of separation in those driveways to prevent any kind of issue with neighbors parking on each other's side of the cement or what have you. So what we took a look at is, we have enough room to separate out the driveways. We have enough room to potentially widen the radius getting into a driveway. We have enough room to put something in between the two driveways to have a clear separation in between those units. And we actually did bring just a quick example. And I know we'll have to go through this with the team. But the example that we thought we would propose as best is what this picture actually shows. This is a gravel-based separation, and there's a couple of reasons why we like this. One is that we would expect that people are probably going to drive over this quite a bit, and so having this as an option versus having some kind of planting that may get run over, or given the small strip, it's going to be subjected to salt consistently and snow blowers and shoveling and just driving over it. So we thought this was a really good looking development, and we thought the solution that they had was a really nice one. So this is, for example, something that we would potentially propose as part of that solution. So I just wanted to add that in there. And that concludes our presentation, and we're here for any other questions you might have.
All right, thank you so much.
Thanks.
All right, do you have any questions from any of the commissioners regarding the presentation or anything this evening?
I've got a couple through the chair. The amount of wetlands, the separation from the back of the building north, how much wetlands is that distance approximately? I think one of the homeowners asked a question concerning that.
My quick answer is I don't know.
Okay.
But I think I just want to point this out. It's basically this area. You guys are down here on Morton Taylor.
No, they're on
Hickory Woods. They are to the east.
Oh, sorry.
view.
This side.
Yeah.
I quit.
There's some on each side. There's people on each side.
Sorry, you have one on the east and then one on the north as well. On Bradley. You're on Bradley, correct? Yes, so it'll be north.
So this is the setback. I don't know what the setback is from the back of the units to the property line. Probably 50 feet from the back of the unit to the property line, which right now is trees. And the goal is to keep it
I
trees.
can't talk right now, I'm in a meeting. Is my son still there?
So on the east side, that area, the Hickory where it's cleared now. There's no tree line.
Hickory Woods, that's all trees.
That is all trees?
That's on the east
Yeah,
side,
okay,
yes.
all right, yeah, so, okay.
That's trees
Okay, his
from
phone number is
Tyler all the way, yeah.
740
That's all trees, the whole.
8425.
So this is all, a majority of that's wetland also. So we'll not be disturbing any of this. And then there's a tree line here that as of right now, we don't intend to disturb any of this with the exception of the area where we're putting the retention pond, which is getting closer to the units at the very north end.
Is that the end where there's no buildings yet?
And then my understanding from your presentation is that if something is removed because of grading, your intent is to try to recover as much
I
as
believe
possible.
we'll have to replace, what we take. There's mature trees there, so if we have to take something down, obviously we'd have to plant something that would grow over time. But generally speaking, I feel like we're in pretty good shape along that property line when it comes to keeping the existing vegetation and tree line.
Through the chair.
Sorry, I hate to do this to you because your question won't pick up for any of the recordings. So if you give us a couple seconds, you'd love to have you come up to the microphone and ask some additional questions. Thank you. Do you have additional questions?
Yes, I had one for Ms. Krishna. This is zone multiple family. Is there, that land is buildable without, right now, it could be any type of multiple family that would go in there. There could be apartments, it could be a mobile home park.
Not mobile home park, but apartments.
Apartments, good,
Yes.
okay.
By right.
Right,
Within the buildable area.
right, within the buildable area, I understand that.
So the applicant is not only preserving all the wetland areas, they're also in exclusion to the areas of disturbance where they obviously have to build their buildings. They are preserving trees in the rest of the areas, and whatever trees they are taking out, they will be providing replacement on site itself to the extent they can put in as many trees as they can. But I think based on their landscape and tree replacement plan, they are maximizing out, and they will still be paying into the township's tree fund for additional tree credits. So the site, once completed, is going to have about as many trees as it can possibly take. It's going to have all the trees in there.
No, I was just concerned at another area as far as for future, if it wasn't seniors, which I would much rather see than other types of multiple family that could possibly be constructed
can.
there. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Budd.
The side entry garages concerns me with people backing out of their garages if someone else is in, if someone is in the garage in the other unit, that's fine, but if there's another car sitting there, will they be able to back out and come out towards the road with the front of the car? Will there be enough room for them to do that?
I wish I had a good picture in here from a overhead angle that you could see. Don't have an example in here either that I can point to. What we did, we had a call today on this, and what we did is we looked at, we actually put a typical dimension of a vehicle since this question came up to make sure that we had enough room for cars to be able to back up and pull out, and we do. We can widen, because right now we have it designed for a specific reason, but we can widen the driveways. And even with putting a strip in, for example, in between the shared driveways, that there's enough room for cars to maneuver in and out of their driveways comfortably, even with a car in the garage as well. So with a second car in the garage, because they're two-car garages.
Correct.
Yep.
Also, our ordinance also calls out how much space can be used for the driveway without going into the front yards and that kind of stuff. Will they meet that criteria if they're going to be widening those driveways?
I think I know what ordinance you're referring to. There's a maximum coverage of the front yard that a parking or a driveway can take up, and I think that number is 30% on a single family lot. So it's a little bit different with senior housing. I'm not sure if the same standard applies, and I'm not sure if it's 30%. I'll have to double check that. But it is something that we want to just minimize the amount of paving, but there's some restrictions to that.
Yeah. I have seen shared driveways like the one that they are proposing between two units where two side entry garages are facing back to back and they can come out, and it is very functional. We will, of course, take a look at the turn radii movements to make sure somebody can come out and turn, especially seniors too.
I don't want them to have to back out onto the road.
to have enough turn radius. They should be able to do that. The way these are set up, I have seen them. I can get you other examples too, and we will put in turn templates on the applicant's plan and also check that. I'm not too keen on the applicant making the driveway wider because that's just adding more cement to, or impervious surface to a front yard that would rather be lawn. So having the gravel strip between the two, because no landscaping is going to survive, somebody's going to drive over it. Gravel strip is a much better idea because it'll also provide for runoff and also for snow to be piled in winter if necessary. The fact that these are going to be long-term lease units and they are maintaining it gives me more comfort than if it were ownership with each person trying to push onto the other person's driveway, individual homeowners. But the shared driveway concept does work. I will make sure.
Well, yeah.
I will check with the templates to make sure that it's not completely
I
reversible.
mean, I could show you places in the township where it hasn't worked and people have been very angry because, you know, whenever they've had a problem, then they want the township to solve it. Unfortunately, that's not our problem. So when I see shared driveways, oh, no, it's not my favorite way of.
Okay.
Do you have any idea what the face-to-face dimension is from each garage?
Sorry, Commissioner Budberg, do you have any other questions?
Oh, I guess the other question, because it's a rental, my other concern was if you're going to have to build a pump station out by Tyler Road to pump sewage and everything to the pipes, who maintains that building after you've gone and moved away? But if they're rental units, it will still be under your preview to take care of that building, say 10 years down the road when there's a problem.
Correct. So the first question about the dimensions between the units, I don't know what the setbacks are without actually pulling the plan out. So I apologize, I don't have that number for you, top of my head. In terms of a sanitary pump station, ideally, first of all, we'll screen that, obviously, so that it's not visible from a resident or from a public right-of-way. And we have talked to Mr. Power about, you know, how would the maintenance and ownership of that pump station go forward? Our original inclination was we'll own it, we'll maintain it, because we're going to manage the property as long as we possibly can. But I think in any instance of public utility, the municipality always likes to own the public utilities or have an easement to those public utilities for maintenance items or what have you. So if, for example, we had to turn this over to the ownership of the township, we would figure out a way to do that. We've also discussed a way where we would also contribute in perpetuity, you know, to the maintenance, the ongoing maintenance and repair of that pump station, so it wasn't a burden to the township for something that they were taking on that they didn't want. So we would help support that long term.
And I agree with the folks, and I know you can't do anything about a light, but I live in the area. I've come down Morton Taylor Road to Tyler Road, had a woman who I thought was going to stop at the corner on her phone, blow right through that stop sign. It's dangerous. I don't know why people don't stop. And so I'm not sure why the county doesn't think that with your units, with what else is there, doesn't warrant a light. So that is a big concern as you know, the residents are concerned, and I know there isn't probably anything you can do about it either, but
I like the four-way stop.
It's going to be a dangerous corner.
So in traffic studies, and Wade Trim is probably one of the best in terms of traffic studies, but they're also based on national benchmarks. And so for a project like this, you take the number of units and you take the resident that's going to live there, and that's how they calculate a daily trip. And so with this not being a full single-family neighborhood, without children, without potentially buses coming in the morning and in the afternoon, that greatly affects what the traffic output would be. And this being a senior living community, and I think even now, which may or may not be taken into effect, but the changes of how people work, the one thing that you probably won't say are residents leaving the development and coming home to the development at the same time. It's going to be very sporadic and spread throughout the day, which is why I think the traffic study basically suggested, no additional impact on the road.
I certainly hope you're right, because I don't want to see it go any other way. I don't want to see anybody injured
And we
there
hope
before it
to never
happens.
impact the roads in a negative way either.
Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Grant?
No, I do have a question, more about the wetlands. Given the way they are now, how will the development affect them long-term? I mean, at this point in time, I know that most of that land is fairly flat. I don't know how much that contributes to the wetlands. But with this development basically taking place of that flat land, how will that impact water flow into the wetlands or not allow it to flow into wetlands? Because I know that over time, wetlands can change. You know, and if it doesn't get the allotted amount of water or rainfall over time, it could dry up.
And
It could change the nature of
I'm
the
going to
land.
say that you probably asked the toughest questions of anybody, because I don't know if I have an answer to that one either. But I can defer to Veronica Clark, the engineer from Wade Trim. And from a storm water management perspective too, because you're right, the site right now is pretty much all wetlands and tree lined, and then it's farmed area.
Right.
So the one thing that we've also talked about to the Hickory Woods HOA, for example, they've had long-term issues with stormwater runoff, probably coming from our site going onto theirs. Their ponds are at capacity. I think at a minimum, this site being developed and our stormwater management system being put in place at a minimum is at least going to help the issues that they've seen from a long-term perspective. But your other question, I'll let Veronica take a stab at.
Regarding yes, so we're going to be discharging to the wetland at a approved rate according to Van Buren Township and then Wayne County as well. We're also going to go through a review from them. So we will be discharging to the wetland, so the wetland will not be dried out or anything like that or get too much flow. I think there is a seasonal stream there that we're going to be discharging to as well, just to make sure that, that seasonal stream doesn't dry out.
Okay, so you've essentially gone through a study that calculates how much water it might receive from that land as it currently is, and then you're trying to match that with the flow that you're creating. Is that correct?
Yeah, we look at pre-existing conditions of the site. Yep, we take that into consideration. And then we look at after, and then we release it at an allowable rate.
Now, is that on the north side?
Yep.
What about what happens on the east side? They're disconnected, right?
Yep. I think they connect, right? Yeah, I think they connect.
The east side? Yeah.
It's that one, because we've actually seen it this past year where we had weeks of like really dry weather and heat,
Right.
and then a ton of rain.
Right.
So the wetland areas that are, hold on a second, just pull this up. So the wetland areas that are more like on the west boundary line, that area in particular, based on how the season's gone this year, those have dried out, and it looks like there are no wetlands there. And then you get 2 days of heavy rain, and it's boom, it's right back. So that's something naturally that we really don't have much control over. But we do have control over the amount of stormwater we're putting back into the northern part of the site.
Yeah, same one for the east. I was just wondering how you might control not creating more water or less water into those existing spaces. I
Right.
mean, I can see how you can handle the north because you're actually artificially allowing water into it and discharging water into it.
And that's what we
from
needed the permit for.
From the detention pond, probably, right?
So, and that's why we needed the permit on the northern part. But on the other ones, all of our stormwater ponds are managing, based on the existing site conditions and what is projected to come into the pond and then discharge out based on modeling numbers from the township and the county. So the other wetlands are just they're gonna have to ebb and flow with the weather.
So whatever rain lands in those spaces, it stays there, or it just does whatever it does.
Right.
And there's no contribution from your development to those spaces, to those two disconnected wetlands?
Correct, because they go into the ponds.
Okay, so everything flows into the ponds. That was
Correct.
okay.
Yep.
Great. You're good. Great. Any other questions from any of the commissioners? To Mr. Moore, did you have, you had some questions a little bit ago, correct?
Yes,
so just real quick, we're, Ray and I's property is like right there. So is that area, when you talk about wetlands, you're generally pointing over here to the west side. Is the north considered wetland? And will that just never be, the land usage would never be altered?
Correct.
Okay.
I'll say it to the mic just so. Yeah, so so the northern part of the site that you were just referring to, that is the portion of the site that we are having a conversation with Eagle about putting that into a conservation easement. That's what they've essentially requested of us because of the high quality nature of it. You put that into a conservation easement and you will never be able to touch that property. So. That's what we wanted to. Okay, good.
So is that all of the wetlands or just the stuff to the north?
Just the stuff to the north.
So can you show me, can you kind of trace that with your hand?
Essentially all of this.
Okay, so anything south of it is,
This, it would, you know, this is like, I think, the highest quality. We will ultimately put a conservation easement probably around all of this.
okay. And what about the other ones south of it?
Not as high quality.
So it's, what happens over time if you don't have a conservation?
Nothing, because
They're still protected
They're still
under
protected.
state law.
Yeah.
Yeah, but they, you know, it would take you to have to essentially replace them or bank them or things like, they're still protected under.
We have a wetland consultant who did an original study. That study is submitted to Eagle, so they know exactly what's on site and then they walk it. So if they came out here and inspected and saw all of that gone and units built there, I don't think they'd be very happy about that.
All right, thank you. Any other questions from any of the commissioners? You have any addition? Yes, sir.
Releasing the law. Say you strategically release the water when it's feasible. Our subdivision also has retention ponds. That's the, and during the wet season, they go all the way to the top. So what happens to your retention ponds when they get full like that? How does that water get distributed?
That's a great question. Because I think what we found out is you have true retention ponds. They retain water, they don't discharge. So with your retention ponds essentially they don't have an outlet from what I understand. Our retention ponds are actually connected to a stormwater system. So water goes into them and it flows out into a stormwater system, then it's taken off site eventually. I don't believe your retention ponds, they're retention ponds, they retain water, that's how they were built.
There's a Robson drain, I know you're probably familiar with it. Robson drain, right? It runs between, all the way down to Robson Road and further. They
Okay.
Actually dredged them this spring.
I think,
yes.
Oh,
that's
yeah.
what- I don't know.
So
about
I
their
guess I
neighborhood.
can kind of clarify. So I think you have a retention pond, which is meant to have water in it. And then ours are detention, so it does have a discharge. So if the pond does get past a 100-year storm, it'll discharge to the north wetland. It'll even overflow through riprap to the northern pond number 1 right there. That's the lowest pond. If it goes over the 100-year storm, it'll go through the riprap into the wetland. So ours has an outlet, so it shouldn't flood.
I guess, I don't know. All I know is I thought it was Robson Drain, but there's a
There's a Robinson
creek,
drain. Yeah,
okay,
it's called Robinson.
and that goes through the sub and out
Mhm.
towards the other side.
Yeah, I think our seasonal
The east
stream,
side.
I think it connects to Robinson Drain, yeah.
I really don't know how the engineering of the ponds are.
thank you so much. Thank you for the comments. Do we have anybody? Yes, thank you.
So my question kind of piggybacks off of what Commissioner Budd was asking. When they did the traffic study, when was it done? Because they have that assisted living complex basically right across the street. So you're going to have people coming out of the assisted living, and it looks like it's going to pretty much line up with the entrance for this coming in and out. That might be something that is brought up to Wayne County as more support, that they need some sort of a light at Tyler. Because if you've got this complex, you've got the 100 and some bed assisted living, along with Hickory Woods, the traffic there is going to be unbelievable. And my question is, did they do the traffic study before they just built this center that's not even open yet? I mean, they just literally poured the driveways. So that would be my concern, is if those two entrances to those two things, one on the north side of Tyler, one on the south side of Tyler, and then butting up to Hickory Woods and the corner of Morton Taylor, I potentially, I agree with you. I think we're setting ourselves up for some potential problems at that corner.
Thank you so much. Somebody want to speak to the traffic study, when it was completed, or answer any of the questions?
The traffic study was completed in September.
Thank you.
Which they hadn't poured the driveways yet. So I don't know if they took into account the entrance for that. Is there any way to tell if they took into consideration for that? Because like I said, it looks like your two driveways are gonna come right across the street from each other.
Since it was taken in September, then we probably didn't take in consideration of that. So, but that's something, I could look into.
Thank you.
Through the chair, I
Yes,
know
Director Bauer.
at some point we spoke about the scoping of the traffic study, and we can follow up and make sure that any of the imminent development projects, including Hampton Manor, were included or can be included with an amendment to it to just check those trip counts. That particular facility has a fairly low trip count because it is assisted living and memory care, but we would want to try to be able to speak to that at least.
So we have that other across the street as well
Yeah, there's a,
discussed.
Yep.
So if we can add that and kind of go through the whole scenario.
Yep, certainly. I'll check back through my notes and see if there's anything that was done with this to bring those projects into the assumptions for 2022 and beyond. I'll check that.
Thank you so much, Director Power.
You're welcome.
Kelly, I can, looking at the report, it looks like the study was updated, because we had seen the study back in July. The study was updated to take out the connection to the Morton Taylor side. Traffic counts, though, doesn't look like traffic counts were updated when the study was updated. Traffic counts were taken last fall. But typically, when you do a traffic study, and I'm not a traffic engineer, but typically when you do it, you expand or look for future counts, right? So you increase those counts based on future projections, and that's what, was done here. Now, you can't say exactly what's going to happen with traffic, but it's a standard, I think as Mr. Bonner said, it's a standard practice as to how you increase and how you project future traffic counts based on the current numbers that were taken. And it looks like their traffic count numbers were taken in October of 2021. And then that data gets analyzed and reanalyzed for different scenarios.
Great, thank you. Any other questions, comments?
So,
Director Power?
so certainly for the next discussion, the next meeting, I'll bring back any findings that myself and the design engineer have on the scoping of that study and see if there were anything missing from our assumed growth in the next couple of years.
Okay, thank you so much. I know we've talked about being short a few members tonight. I'm sure they'd probably like to go home this evening after we've been bombarding everybody with questions. So if we're ready, if we want to table the item so that way we can come back at a later date, if somebody's ready to make a motion.
I'll move. Mr. Chair, that we tabled Chris Gardner, SB Invest LP Brookwood preliminary site plan for a future meeting.
All right, thank you so much. Do you have support? A motion to table the preliminary site plan review to a later meeting by Commissioner Cullen and support by Commissioner Gray. All in favor to table, well, any discussions, comments regarding the motion? All in favor to table the motion or table the preliminary site plan, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Right, and agenda item number 2 is tabled. Thank you so much for coming out this evening. We really appreciate walking through everything with us. It helped answer quite a few questions that we had after reviewing it as well with spending the time tonight. So thank you, and thank you for making the trip out from Holland. I know that's quite a drive.
And the residents for being here.
Yes, and thank you. Yes, thank you to the residents. Thank you so much for coming and questions about how the site's set up.
Yes, feel free to have me as a point of contact. If you look at any of the notices that were published for this, I'm Dan Power. I'm in the building department. Just feel free to reach out to me anytime, okay?
Have a good night.
Thank you.
Any-
I'm allowed to say that, right?
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
Soft. It is. It's just soft.
That brings us up to general discussion tonight, Director Power.
Yes, my only comment is that we're managing a lot of, there's actually a big flush of development and ordinance priorities at this time of year, and yet there's also holidays and a need to kind of wind down. So I'm going to be working to try to carefully manage our agendas. We only have one more regular meeting this year in December. That being said, leading up to that, what I'd like to do is to distribute probably an email and reach out to all of you planning commissioners to see what your level of interest is in some various ordinance priority topics that we have coming up. We're going to be looking at picking back up on our electric vehicle charging station study for getting an ordinance in place for EV charging stations. We have the residential zoning ordinance amendments that we've been talking about that we will schedule for hearing. But as far as signing people up or getting some interest in maybe some committee level discussions, we'll look at electric vehicle charging stations. We have a development initiated lake ordinance / dock ordinance issue that we're looking at, possibly some things related to property maintenance. And so to the extent these involve the Planning Commission, I'll be sure to pass around an email that sees if you have any interest in having some committee discussions about these so that we can start to develop these.
Thank you so much. I know at least, I think Commissioner Jar mentioned it at the last meeting, and I kind of feel the same way, as if we can start structuring it where we have several commissioners volunteer onto a committee and look at the ordinance, and then can come before us to try to cut down on some time in meetings and multiple reviews for everybody. I think that would speed things up and help take some time away from the meetings at that point. So thank you so much for looking into that. Do you have any other items, other things?
No.
No, nothing for general discussion.
I'm sure I'll see some of you, but happy Thanksgiving if I don't.
Happy Thanksgiving.
Same to you.
Time yet.
You know, it might be interesting, they say they've got a project in Taylor. Maybe to know how many acres that project is and if an address, because, I mean, Jeff and I and Carol used to travel and look at some of their other projects, not particularly this one, but when we were looking at for the Hampton, we did. We went up to their one up in, seemed like it was a ways, but anyway, we visited about 3 or 4 of them that day. So if they've got some in the area, it might just be interesting to see what they look like. And do they all have these shared driveways? Do they build all of them that way?
I think they came up with the shared driveway design because their first plan was all front entry garages, and we said, no, no front entries. We don't, Planning Commission does not want to see a wall of garages. So I think they came up with this as their creative.
Well, you know, and I agree with you on that, But I just have a real concern with somebody
valid
backing out of a
concern, yeah.
driveway. I don't want them backing out on the road. And if the neighbor's got somebody sitting there, are they still gonna be able to back out and come this way? I'd almost rather see him, the front entry with the way he showed him in that one place. That's terrible to say, but the seniors, we're a unique bunch. And you
Yes,
gotta
we
be
are.
careful.
I can say that now.
They flipped it to the last unit.
So,
We'll bring back some of that data too. I did find at one point the dimension for the distance between the garages, and I'll just repeat this in the future meeting. But it is in the plans. It just wasn't presented. But the big thing, there's a standard for the width of a driveway. It should be at least 12 feet for the main throat. And then there's for side entry garages, some of our more condensed developments have side entry garages on 60, 70-foot lots. And so I think the rule of thumb is somewhere between 20 and 24 feet for that. The adjacent portion to the garage is reasonable to get people out and safely maneuvering. So
Maybe Dan, we can talk to them about maybe doing the side entry. Maybe we spoke to them about it for the end units and keeping front entry because like Sherry said, we are talking about seniors. We don't want to make them nervous just coming out of their garages too. I mean, if it's too tight. So
I mean,
safety is important.
Yeah, we've talked about, I mean, you can go through some of the subdivisions where there are side entries and it doesn't look like there's a lot of room. I mean, they can do that, but they're not having to face another car in another garage door. Because in single homes, side entry garages aren't going into another garage or to somebody else's shared driveway. That's the biggest problem I have with that whole thing.
some examples where it's two adjacent single-family lots with mirroring side entry garages and a narrow grass strip between them. And that's kind of what I think they're trying to go for with this idea with the gravel.
I think they are too, but I don't think in places where we've got side garage now, it's right up next to another side entry garage.
Either way, I'll certainly bring back any, I'll make sure we showcase what their current design section is. And like I said, somewhere between 40 and 45 feet between the two garage doors. And if they bring back an alternate, I'll certainly bring that forward as well.
Any other comments? Anything for general discussion? Have a motion to adjourn for this evening.
So moved.
Support?
Support.
All in favor to adjourn, say aye.
Aye.
All right. Have a great night, everybody.
You as well. Have a happy Thanksgiving.
Happy Thanksgiving.
How about you
you
making
share.
some of them front end?
So what is this like, 12? He says this like 12.
Yes.
So it's going to be